The S&P 500 is down by more than 20% this year so far, making it the first bear market since 2020. Meanwhile, Liv-ex FineWine1000 is up by more than 10% in the same period, making it a favorable situation at the wine market. So Rune Spid, Commercial Director of RareWine Invest, why are we here today?
I think we're here for one reason, Lars. We want to be very transparent from a RareWine Invest perspective about how we communicate and how we see the wine market. I think in general, a lot of medias, a lot of people in the wine industry is maybe trying to create some kind of bubble around wine investment in general. And from that perspective, taking the last year into consideration. We are of course very delighted and proud about the results for our investors, but we also want to be transparent about the fundamentals part of a wine investment, the stability and the long horizon.
Let's look back in time for a while. What was 2021 for a year?
I think, as in general, the ones that has been with us in 2021, and also the investors for going back, will look at 2021 as an extraordinary year. We are extremely proud and delighted about the results that we have created for our investors out of 2021. But of course, also looking into the future, want to give some kind of feedback about how we see it moving into a more normalization again, with two things in mind: the fundamentals about a wine investment, long horizon and stability.
And now, Rune, 2021 was indeed extraordinary, but we are here 6 months later. We have a war in Ukraine, we have rising interest rates, we have high inflation. What is the wine market now in the middle of 2022?
I would say that when we look at it right now, there is not that much that has changed. You mentioned it earlier on yourself, the FineWine1000 index is up the latest 6 months with around 10% or something like that. So you could say there is not much that has changed now, but we still believe that we will see changes coming in the coming time.
You mentioned change in the wine market. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Definitely, Lars. If we look at it from a perspective to say in 2021 the wine market was up with 20%. I actually believe that champagne was up around 40%. Yeah. So I think it's important from RareWine Invest and myself to get and tell a little bit about my expectations to the coming half year, 1 year ahead. I think that stability and normalization is the two words that we will look into. I think that we will not see the wine market been performing as it has done the last 1.5 years, but it will move more into to say maybe some wines, the prices will drop a little bit, but there will also be purchasing opportunities where you can look at it to say that some of the most finest and rarest bottles in the world, there will not be that many buyers to these bottles. So it will give our investors the opportunity also to come in and get access to some very, very good bottles in the future also. Actually, Lars, I think that this reminds me a little bit about 2019. From a wine investment perspective, maybe a little boring year, coming after the record year of 2018. But I still believe the investors that we have had in that journey time is still very happy about their wine investment, and I imagine that they are smiling a little bit in the couch still.
If we look into a worst case scenario and we will experience a new financial crisis like the one in 2008, how do you expect the wine market to respond?
I believe, Lars, that it will be a lot like what we have seen with historical data going back in time to see that wine is a very strong investment and asset class in time of crisis. When we look at it from a perspective, let's take worst case scenario with the Lehman Brothers back in 2008 and the impact of that. It would be naive not to think that it would have an impact on the wine market as well. But then we saw that it was around 1 year afterwards that the wine market was back, purchasing, trading, all those steps that have a huge impact on the wine market was definitely on again after 1 year.
Yes, and to put things into perspective, it actually took around 4 years for the stock market to recover after the financial crisis. But moving on, Rune, we're going to look at the 5 main areas for wine investment. We're looking into Burgundy, we're looking into Champagne, Italy, rest of the world, and finally mighty Bordeaux. And let's start out with Burgundy. What do you expect from Burgundy for the next 6 months?
The short answer, Lars, to that one would be stability and small price increases over the next year. As I mentioned before, I think we will see an impact on the opportunities buying some of these most rare and finest wine in the world, and of course those with the micro production out of Burgundy is that case that I mentioned before. So that will definitely be the case that we would look into with Burgundy. But I still believe and expect it to go more back to normal as what we saw in 2019 to compare again.
Looking into one of the more popular asset classes, that's champagne. Champagne has been doing extremely well over the past 1.5 years. But what can one expect for champagne in the next 6 months?
I think in that case it's important, Lars, to take a little step back and look back to the past and see what we actually recommended back then and our analytics about the choices that we made for our wine investment. Back then we believed a lot in champagne due to the cost of the production of champagne, and we believed that it was actually way too cheap. And for those investors being on board in that time, I think that we have performed very, very well. That said, it does of course also have been a huge increase of the different champagne positions. So it could be a chat with your advisor about could it be now that we're going to sell. That said, we still believe a lot in champagne in the coming years. It is like a bond in our point of view. It will grow, and we still believe for champagne in the future as well.
Moving on from champagne to one of the upcoming classes for wine investments, namely Italy. What do you expect from Italian wines in the coming 6 months?
It's always amazing going back to Italy, talk
Yes.
about all these amazing wines coming out of Italy. My general opinion about and expectations to the Italian wines is that it's still way too cheap if you compare to the quality of the wine. So I still believe a lot in Italian wines in general. That said, I don't see necessarily that the Italian wine will increase a lot in the coming year or 1.5 years. So maybe it will be a little bit more stable and normalized, as we talked about earlier on. That said, back in 2019, when we had a boring wine investment year, Italian wines were still the best performing out of a lot of index in the general wine market.
Yes, and looking into the investment class called Rest of the World, which includes American wines and also single malt whiskey from Scotland and Japan. What can one expect from the Rest of the World category?
Again, don't expect major increases in the Rest of World category. I actually believe that it's quite similar to what we see in Italy. Long horizon stability is what we will be looking into with the Rest of World, both regarding American wines, whiskey, etc.
And traditionally, we round off with Bordeaux, the mighty Bordeaux, one of the, at least in the past, most important investment classes. But how is the future looking for Bordeaux?
Yeah, I believe that the key word with Bordeaux wines and our investors that has Bordeaux included in their portfolio is patient. You need long time horizon. We don't recommend that often Bordeaux wines in our portfolio. Of course, we have some amazing Bordeaux wines, and those who have that, the key word is patient. It will take time for those to increase over the coming years.
And with that said, thank you to you, Rune Splid, for important knowledge and data on the wine markets. Despite an unstable situation on the world financial markets, wine investment is still categorized by exactly the same fundamentals as always: stable returns and long horizon. Thank you for watching.